Hey guys, this is Faster U4 brought to you by Fitland, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomax and Capital Cycles. If you're a cyclist and you want to go faster, then let's giddy up. Go! Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fast U4 brought to you by Fitland, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomax and Capital Cycles. Hey, I had an idea. I wanted to test out a little theory about aerodynamics. Now, don't get too excited. I know that'll really get you going. But what I wanted to know was, you know how when you're in your time trial position, the reason that you're in that position is clearly to improve your aerodynamics. And that seems fairly straightforward if you're in time trial and you want to go faster. Now, everyone knows the downside of being in a time trial position, namely a reduction in the sustainable power you can produce for a few reasons, not the least of which is the reduction in one's hip angle so that you can get your back flat, get your head in line with your shoulders so that you can reduce your aero drag. Now, I've tested this a number of times using the Chung virtual elevation method, which is available to you in the free software known as Golden Cheetah. You've got to sort of figure out how to use it, have the right data file, have the right format of ride, but if you do, it's a very accurate way to determine, using power meter and speed and virtual elevation versus real elevation, your aerodynamic drag. So I've done that. Now, I also know what my maximum sustainable power is pretty accurately in my time trial position. And I know the difference between that and my maximum sustainable power in upright position on the hood. So why do all these things matter? Well, what I wanted to know was, does the power difference make up for the aerodynamics? Now, you've got to assume that it doesn't. Otherwise, why would you bother riding around in a time trial position in the first place? But I want to test that for myself and also know, well, what does the difference have to be? Like, what difference does that aerodynamic efficiency actually make? So I got some numbers here. I ran the math for time trial positions, about a sample set of about 7 time trials, same position. I got a drag figure for me. I have a power figures and the same thing on the road. So let's look at what the numbers actually say. We'll determine what the difference is and what's better. So let's talk drag figures first. Coefficient of drag in a regular position. This is in the drops for me, so it's a little more aero than it even would be on the bar tops or on the hoods. Standard clothing, this is just in a jersey, bibs. There's no drag from an extra jacket or anything like that. Standard position 0.31. So this is down in your semi-aero on the drops position. Regular, nothing draggy about the clothing or anything else about the bike. Road bike, Cannondale Super 6 Evo, 0.31. Now in that position, that's a position where you can't produce as much power as in a steady state as an open, very open, high position. You might be in climbing or something like that where you're on the bar tops or the hoods. But the power there is a little less than that. So the power in that position, maximum sustainable, about 360 watts for me in that position. So if you work out the what that is worth in terms of drag, people talk about watts per kilo. Well, you're talking flat, the crucial divisor is watts per aero drag. The weight's not nearly as important, it's almost marginal. So that 3.1 with the 360 watts divided by the 0.31 drag, 1161 watts per CdA. So let's talk about the TT position, compare. I'll just get straight to the numbers. 0.24 is the drag. Maximum reliable steady state power in that position, about 325. Okay, so we've got about 35 watts reduction. Maximum steady state power is at that closed position. But of course a much better drag coefficient, 0.24 versus 0.21. So what does that come out to? Well, let's look at it in the most common terms people refer to, which is what it might correlate to for a 40k TT. Well, if you were to go out and start your 40k TT on a road bike, sit in the drops at your maximum sustainable power, to higher power, worse aero drag, what's the difference? Well, you'll get an average speed of about 41.85 k an hour in the drops versus 43.67 in the TT position. So you're getting an extra just under 2 kilometers per hour in that TT position, despite the fact you're producing a lot less power, 35 watts less. The aero drag gets you another 2 kilometers per hour, the reduction in aero drag. Well, what does that mean in terms of time? So that would give you a time in a 40k TT, 57 minutes and 24 seconds on the road bike versus 55 minutes and 2 seconds on the TT bike. That's 2 minutes 22 seconds. So just over 2 minutes, close to 2.5, between the TT and the road bike. So huge. So in terms of you can then turn that around and determine what that could be measured in terms of wattage. So how many more watts would you need on that road bike to be the same speed? I figured it out. You'd need 401, meaning 76 watts. So that's obviously a whole bunch. It's not 76 watts from the TT position. So in terms of the increase in power you would need on the road bike, you'd need 360 versus 401, 40, so we'll call that 40 watts. So a 40 watt saving, or 40 watt increase you would need. Now, because of the curve, because of your lactate curve, that is going to put you in a state from obviously clearly over your maximum sustainable power output. There's no way you're going to be able to hold that for more than a relatively short period of time. It's impossible. So what I have found, where this will go, so I guess that's question number one answered, which is it really faster? Yes, it is. 40k TT, just over 2 minutes. You would need to produce an unsustainable amount more power on the road bike to get anywhere near the TT. So if you're wondering if you can kind of get away with competing on a road bike in TTs, yeah, not really. Not really. I mean, some of that difference, there will be shoe covers, maybe skin suit, the aero helmet on the TT, but it's certainly not going to account for that 40 watts might be half that at best, at absolute best, for those little accoutrements that are different in terms of clothing. But really, no, you're still not going to get anywhere near it. Now that's not, by the way, including a disc wheel. So I've recently upgraded to a disc wheel for a TT bike this season. I've only ridden it in angle once, and it does initially feel a lot faster. The drag numbers from the company indicate that should fall to 0.23 or even maybe 0.25, 225 with the disc wheel on compared to the Zip 404 I had. So again, the difference with the disc wheel will be a lot more pronounced again. So the last thing I'd say about TT position, from my experience from seeing not only me and messing with position to try to get that, so you try to get the best balance on a TT bike, of course, between aerodynamic drag and power. You get less draggy and less draggy and less draggy. You hit kind of a sweet spot where your power doesn't reduce too much, and then as you reduce your frontal area, you get lower. You tend to hit a point where your power plummets a lot. It's not a linear curve. So I've had experience testing a lot of riders now using the same technique over a lot of data points, and it seems like in general the best TT position in terms of loss of power versus aero drag, somewhere between 10 to 7% loss in maximal steady state power. So, clarify what I'm talking about. Probably what you want to do for most people is find a position where you're comfortable. You can't, assuming you have to assume in all this you're in a position where you can actually make the power, and you're not limited by things like the fact your shoulders want to fall off, you don't have enough core strength and all that. Let's assume that's all a given. You want to reduce your frontal area, and usually that's done by getting your head more in line with your back, and of course reducing the chest area into the wind. All those things are very important with TT position. You can do that by adjusting your bars, your head and all that, but fundamentally it's going to mean that the angle between your femur and your torso is going to reduce. So you want to get that, and once you get to a point where you're somewhere between 10 and 7% loss in your maximum lactate steady state power, that's usually a really sweet spot because you're producing as much power as you can without falling off the cliff, and you have reduced your aero drag as much as you can, without doing that. So that's probably not the best way of describing it. For me, that number's about 9%. I have seen as good as about 7%, and so somewhere in that range, 9 to 7%. So if you can produce 300 watts in a standard climbing position, steady state. By the way, if you want to know your steady state power, of course you can get tested, you can get a lactate test, you can do a lot of various ways, but probably the best way to do it is, well, not the best, actually it's a pretty second-rate way, just go on a hill that's very long, only over about 20 minutes, and produce the best power you can for that time without blowing up. And that will be very close to your steady state power. It's almost by definition, assuming you don't blow, that is almost by definition what your steady state maximum power is. And I know that figure, let's say it's 300 watts. If you get to in a position where you're producing about 10% less than that, call it 270, maybe 275, maybe even 280 if you're real good, somewhere around that figure. That's a good figure. You don't want to get much lower than that because your maximum steady state power will drop precipitously. Your ratio will change a lot, and you might find that the reduction in drag isn't worth the reduction in power. Vice versa. You know, you want to, if you find that you're only losing, you know, a couple of percentage points, it's likely you can go lower. You can reduce your frontal area and your hip angle and go quite a bit faster. It tends to be the sweet spot. Now, of course, this doesn't really matter too much when you're talking about hill climbing because the speeds are so much lower. Having said that, an interesting little sort of issue about speed versus aero drag. A lot of people sort of don't realize that the relationship about the gain is actually an inverse to what most people think it is. It's pretty easy to check with calculators, but suffice to say, if you are a person who produces less power, you are better off. You're going slower. The slower you go, the better gain in general you get from aerodynamic efficiencies, you know, things like disc wheels and TT bikes and investing in your position and all that. Because to do with the fact that, you know, if you go from A to Z, A to B on a course, you're out there longer. And of course, and as a percentage gain in terms of time, you're gaining more than the guy who's going faster, because aero drag is, again, it's not a linear curve, it's more like exponential. So the faster you go, the more the air resistance builds. So you know, say you're someone who produces 300 watts at maximum lactate steady state, and say that gets you in your position and all that 40 kilometers an hour. Let's say 35 kilometers an hour, make the math a bit easier. Okay, well, if you make some aero gains, you can probably increase that a couple of K an hour really, really easily. Now, if you're someone who's producing more power, you're a faster rider, you can ride at 400, whatever it is, say 43 kilometers an hour. The aero drag resistance is going up exponentially at that point, where the power cost, and you could express that in aero gain cost, it's sort of two sides of the same coin, gets exponentially more. So to get that 2 kilometers an hour, to go from 35 to 37 kilometers an hour doesn't take that much. To go from 43 to say 45, still only 2 kilometers an hour, but it's a huge requirement more in power, because you have to push so much more air. You know, if you think of like a car, well, any car can drive from 80 kilometers an hour to 100 kilometers an hour with relatively small differential in power. But if you're driving a Bugatti and you want to get from 400 to 430 kilometers an hour or something, 420, I can't remember the numbers, but you know, it's something like, you know, 200 horsepower or 300 horsepower more or something, just for that extra 20 K an hour, because of the factoring of the air drag. Now, of course, in people, the power numbers are much lower, but because you've got a lot less power to play around with. So, you know, you can make quite big gains by improving your aero and, of course, your power. The slower you are, it's almost like the more you want to concentrate on it, you start hitting a wall at the higher speeds. So that's just some thoughts I had about aero drag. and some numbers I got. If you want to do TTing, get a TT bike. My suggestion is go to Capital Cycles. Tell them I sent you. They are the best. They'll set up your position. They'll set up your bike. Just actually, before I had this sort of friendly relationship with Capital Cycles, I had some bike fits done by other organisations, people, and it was, I think I paid $250 per bike for one of them, and it really, I know it wasn't helpful. I mean, it didn't really do much. The changes were very minimal. To me, it wasn't helpful. I'm not saying it wouldn't be to anyone, but it wasn't helpful to me. And that's just a statement of fact, really. It's not even particularly a criticism, but it wasn't helpful to me. So it's $500 completely down the tubes, and I think that's a lot of money. I've been to Capital Cycles and had bike fits done. And I'm not saying this, it would genuinely, instantly, pull there, looked at my stem, changed the stem length and the angle, and it was immediately, not placebo, it was immediately noticeable that it was a more comfortable position and I could produce more power. And I sort of had this thing where, if something is genuinely beneficial, in very marginal things, like little tiny aero gains, sometimes you can't really tell, but in something that, a positional change, you can, if you're experienced, you can generally feel if something quite quickly is going to be more efficient or not, and more comfortable. Anyway, it didn't really cost anything at Capitals. You might have to buy a new stem or whatever it's going to be, or saddle, but they've got it all set up there, and it's cheap if not free, and they honestly do a great job. And that has nothing to do with the fact that I really like Capital Cycles. They just did a better job. Simple as that. So that'd be my suggestion about getting a TT bike. Maybe other bike shops do a really good job too, I don't know. But I go to Capitals and I like it. I think they do a good job. Alright, I'll leave it there. If you'd like to catch some training from me, you can email me. steve@fitlab.co.nz. Go to fitlab.co.nz. As always, it's brought to you by FitLab. So nutrition, Biomaxa, Capital Cycles. See you on the weekend, guys. Thanks for watching/listening to Fast You Fall, brought to you by FitLab, Capital Cycles, Tailwind Nutrition, and Biomaxa. If you'd like to get in touch for a coaching program or testing, you can get hold of me, steve@fitlab.co.nz, or go to fitlab.co.nz. Talk soon, guys.